Well, Happy New Year, everybody. We made it. We made it. Well, congratulations, because 2020 is now officially behind us. Remember when this whole thing started? 2020 all started out with wildfires in Australia. Remember that? Then we thought we were going to go into World War III with Iran. Do you remember that too? And little did we know that both of those things, that seemed like huge things at the time, would just literally just be footnotes on the beginning of a very, very eventful year. Now, for me, I remember when the lady from Kaiser called me to tell me that I had tested positive for COVID. This is like late June that we're talking about. Now, talk about a tough job, right? Your job is to tell other people that they have tested positive for a global pandemic. I thought my job was hard. Imagine being the lady that had to tell people that. Now, so imagining what this lady must be going through, she said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but you've tested positive for the coronavirus." And do you know what I said? I said, "What? Yes! That's amazing! I'm so glad that you're telling me that." I'm a number 7, so on the Enneagram, which means everything's a party. I want everybody else to feel good. And so she said, "Sir, like, I don't understand. Why are you so excited about getting the coronavirus?" And I said, "Because now I can say that I was a part of history." Guys, you and I have lived through 2020. And do you know what that means? That means that you and I have lived to be a part of history. And today I have some good news for y'all, and that is that it can't get any worse from here. Now, some of you are thinking, please don't say that, okay? Well, here's the thing, as we look back at 2020, it really was one for the history books, right? And there is so much that we wish we could change about the previous year. Like, yes, we wish we could change things like the pandemic. Yes, we wish we could change things like the stay-at-home order or the murder hornets. You remember the murder hornets? Whatever happened to the murder hornets? But here's the thing, I don't know about you, but for me, as much as I wish I could change some of the things that I couldn't control, the things that I wish I could change the most were the things that I could control. Like, I wish I wasn't so afraid. I wish I wasn't so stressed. I wish I didn't eat so much. I wish I didn't yell so much. And therein lies what I love about the new year, about the beginning of every new year. Do you know what I love about the new year? I love the fact that God has served up life into these bite-sized little chunks. That if you want to think about it this way, that God gives us an automatic reboot button on life, a chance to start over completely. And you know what it's called? It's called a new day. It's called a new week. It's called a brand new year. And I came across this poem this week. I like to read this poem in the beginning of every year, which sounds kind of weird, but it always kind of reminds me of what is good about the new year and the opportunities that the new year brings. And the poem goes something like this. It says, "I am the new year. I'm an unspoiled page in your book of time. I'm your next chance at the art of living. I'm the opportunity to practice what you've learned about for the past 12 months. All that you've sought but didn't find is hidden in me. All the good that you tried but didn't achieve is mine to grant. All that you dreamed but didn't dare to do. All that you hoped but did not will. All the faith that you claimed but did not have. These slumber lightly, waiting for you in the new year." And I think deep down, a lot of us instinctively know a lot of those things. Because the new year isn't necessarily about looking back, but the new year is a lot more about looking forward. And so we're not going to look back at 2020. What we really want to do is we want to look forward into 2021. What are you looking forward to in 2021? I love what the Apostle Paul says in this verse right here. Philippians chapter 3, verses 13 through 14, it says this right here. But one thing I do. Here's just one thing that I do. Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Okay, so we're starting a brand new series called 5 Ways to Thrive in 2021. And over the course of the next 5 weeks, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about 5 disciplines. We're going to be talking about 5 mindsets. We're going to be talking about 5 actions, 5 attitudes that are really going to help you get the most out of the new year. But here's the thing, I think today's message might actually be the most important one because Paul says this. He says, you want to thrive? He says, well then I'm actually not going to give you 5 things. I'm actually just going to give you 1. And honestly, I love this. This series really should be called Forget About Everything Else and Just Focus on This One Thing. That out of all of the, like the 600 plus commandments in the law, hey, if you forget all that other stuff, just remember this one thing. Out of all of the spiritual disciplines that you could focus on, prayer, fasting, Bible reading, just one. I just want you to focus on this one thing. And you know what that one thing is? That you and I in 2021 need to commit ourselves to having a bad memory. That we need to commit ourselves to having a bad memory. Verse 13, let's go back to the verse. It says this, but one thing that I do, I forget what's behind me. Have you ever told your kid that after a baseball game? Hey, you had a bad baseball game. You need to just have a really good memory and put that behind you. Next game is a brand new game. Have you ever said that to your kid? Have you ever said that to yourself after a bad semester, after a bad test? Hey, it's a bad test. It's a bad grade. It's one bad grade. You know what? Next semester is a whole brand new semester. I gotta forget about what's behind me. What you're going to find is that this word in the Greek for forget meant not only to forget something, but to forget something to the extent where I completely wipe it from my memory. Believe it or not, it was actually an athletic term that was used of a runner who had the ability to pass another runner and to never look back. I'm a runner, and that's a hard habit. I mean, all people suffer from a deplorable case of comparison, right? I want to see how I'm doing compared to everybody else. I want to see how I'm doing, and the way to see how I'm doing is to compare myself to other people. But here's the thing. As a runner, you're not supposed to focus on the other runners. You're supposed to focus on the finish. I remember a friend told me one time, he said, man, I was doing so well during that marathon. I absolutely killed the first 18 miles of that marathon. For the first 18 miles, I was way ahead of everybody else. And you know what I said to him? I said, you know that the marathon's actually a 26-mile race, don't you? See, what you're going to find is that the other runners don't determine when I'm done, right? The finish line does. And so what I'm here to tell you is that no matter how long, no matter how hard the last year may have been, if you still have breath in your lungs and if you still have blood pumping in your veins, then your race isn't done yet. You haven't reached the finish line yet. And that means that God still has the best in store for you in the new year. Let me tell you this, one of the most dramatic moments in history, 1519, Hernan Cortez lands with 11 ships, 500 soldiers, 100 sailors, and a partridge in a pear tree to pursue glory in the New World. And when they all came ashore on the east coast of Mexico, some of them were fearful. Some of them wanted to go back to Cuba. So once the men were all on shore and once all of the supplies were unloaded, do you know what the first command that Cortez gave his people? Burn them. Burn everything. Not the supplies. Burn the ships. Maybe you know that story. You know what he's essentially saying? He's essentially saying this, that going back is not an option. In 1 Kings chapter 19, the prophet Elisha is about to take over for the prophet Elijah. Totally confusing, right? Elisha is about to take over for Elijah. And in case you don't know too much about these guys, this is huge, okay? This is like if you're a Lakers fan, and if they had an official ceremony to hand off the baton between Kobe and LeBron, I mean, this would be it, okay? Elijah is an old man. His contract is too big. He's not scoring nearly as many points as prophet as he used to. And so here's the story. He watches 11 pair of oxen go by. He looks at this 12th pair of oxen go by. Elisha is behind that 12th pair of oxen. And so what does Elijah do? He takes his cloak, he wraps it around Elisha, and it's like the weirdest thing in the world, right? It almost looks like he's trying to abduct a grown man. But that's actually that's not what he's trying to do. Elijah, he takes his cloak, he puts it around Elisha. Weird. But the meaning is actually very simple. It's to say this: you are the chosen one. That I want you to leave your past behind, and I want you to join me in the future. And it says this in 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 21. So Elisha left him, went back, took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat, gave it to people, and they ate. Listen to this. Then he set out to follow Elijah and become his servant. Do you know what Elisha is doing? Doing the same thing as Cortez. That through their one symbolic statement, they're saying, I'm not going back. I've burned everything that there is to burn in the past. I refuse to look backwards. And I have made a commitment in my heart that there is only one direction that God wants me to go. That no matter how great the past may seem, that no matter how awful my circumstances look right now, I have made a commitment in my heart not to be nostalgic. Because here's the thing, you cannot look in both directions at one time, right? So the question that God is asking you, the question that God is asking me is, are you looking forwards or are you looking backwards? Well, Mark, how do I know if I've done that? How do I know if I'm looking forwards or if I'm looking backwards? Well, let me tell you this. In 2021, do you know how you've burned your own plow? Do you know how it is that you've burned your own ships? Wrote a couple things down. You know that you've burned your own ships when you stop complaining about your circumstance. Let me tell you this. This is probably the biggest thing that I'm working on in my heart right now. Because the Bible tells me that regardless of my circumstance, that I am to do everything in my life without every Facebook comment, every Instagram post, that I am to do everything without grumbling or complaining, so that I may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault, in a crooked and depraved generation. Do you know why I complain about the present? Not the president. Do you know why I complain? That should make it into the blooper reel. Do you know why I complain about the present? Because I don't feel like it measures up to the past. Let me give you a second thing. You know that you've burned the ships when you stop talking about normal. You know that you're not looking back anymore when you stop talking about life going back to normal. Back and normal, we use those words all the time together, right? What you have to understand is that the word normal is actually the perfect example of you and me not doing what Paul is asking to do. You know, because you and I, do you know what we're doing? We're all dreaming of the day that kids go back to school. We're all dreaming of the day that churches will go, say it with me, back to normal. We're all dreaming of the day when sports in life will go back to what they were. We use back and normal all the time. Here's the problem. The more you want things to go back to normal, the more you'll forget about what's next. The more time you spend thinking about how bad 2020 was, the more time you're going to end up wasting 2021. You know why? Because looking back can distract you. Let me ask you this. Here's what I believe. Do you believe this? I believe that if things never go back to normal, that it's only because God is about to do something incredible. And if God is about to do something incredible, then I can let go of normal. I can let go of the past. Because looking back can slow me down. It actually can keep me from what lies ahead. And part of what we're talking about here is something that we hate talking about, we hate doing in our culture. It's an easy thing to talk about, extremely difficult thing to do, and it's something called commitment. Why don't you say that word with me? Especially if you're a single guy, say it with me. It's the word commitment. Okay. Now, commitment isn't such a glamorous word in our culture, and for good reason, right? When Andrea and I first got married, listen to this. We only had one premarital session where we were supposed to cover money, sex, in-laws, conflict, parenting, goals, division of labor, and all of our expectations. Just in case you're wondering, I don't recommend that. And at one point, Andrea's pastor asked us this question: what will you do if you wake up one morning and your feelings of love for each other are now gone? What are you going to do if you don't feel in love anymore? Andrea answers first. And in true Andrea form, if you know my wife, she said this: that I will honor my commitment. Now let me tell you this, at the time, that was the wrong answer. I mean, in my mind, we were perfect for each other. I mean, the energy, the love, the magic between us were so special that the idea of Andrea needing to stay with me just because she was committed to me, preposterous. And so I let her know that by pouting. But let me tell you this, that for the past 21 years of good times and bad, she has stayed in love with me, and do you know how? By honoring her commitment. That, in other words, while this world honors their commitment by staying in love, Andrea has stayed in love by honoring her commitment. Does that make sense? Now, this doesn't mean that she's like, hey, I'm going to be a martyr and just live hopelessly in this loveless marriage. And this also doesn't mean that she's like, hey, look at what an amazing godly woman I am by staying with someone as awful as you are. The reason why we're still in love is not because every day we saw how things went. We just tried our best to do what we could, and then we made an evaluation at the end that maybe I'm still in love or no longer in love. It's because the reason why we're in love is because we started with an evaluation. That I am committed to being in love, and then it's from that one commitment that flows thousands of other smaller commitments that I'll listen, I'll give, I'll watch all your crazy British dramas on Netflix with you, that I'll fight fair when we fight, that I'll make up quickly when we do, that I won't go surfing on the internet for things that I shouldn't see, that I won't go flirting in a bar, that I won't escape with a bottle or with a screen, that I made a promise for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer. And see, what I'm trying to say is that the reason why my marriage is so good is not because every day I'm looking back and I'm always comparing my wife to every other lost relationship of my past. The reason why my relationship with my wife is so good is because I've given up all comparisons. And I'm committed. I'm committed to making the relationship I have in front of me work. And what's true with your loves is also true with your life. 2021 isn't going to be good if you're constantly looking back in time and you're comparing it to times lost. It's only going to be filled with hope as you are committed to making this year work. What I'm trying to say is that the only way you're going to make 2021 work is to believe that 2021 is going to be a great year. The only way to make 2021 a good year, a productive year, a God-honoring year, is by going all in on 2021. To hold nothing back. Which is why Paul actually goes on to say this in verse 13. He says, "But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining," or what's another word for that? Or committing towards what is ahead. Have you ever played in a poker tournament and pushed all of your chips into the middle of the table? I mean, that is a scary time. Because if you do that all the time, you're going to be broke. Right? You are going to have nothing. When you push all of your chips into the middle of the table, it means I got no backup plan. I ain't got no plan B. Commitment means that if I push every one of my chips to the middle of the table, and if this hand doesn't do the trick, then it's going to be a really, really short night. But we don't like that. We like having a safety net. This is why we all have insurance. But here's what you have to understand. That God isn't in the business of insurance. God is in the business of building your faith. And the way that you and I build our faith is by doing just that. Going all in on God. By going all in on the new year. A commitment to the new year and a commitment to God in the new year means that I don't need normal. I just need Jesus. That no matter how bleak the future looks, that no matter how good things were in the good old days, that no matter what's happened in the past with my position, with my marital status, that no matter what, that I am committed to what is next and not what is normal. Did I burn the ships? Charbroiled the ox? Given up the keys that as long as I follow a good God, that He will bring about good things, and because of that, I can have hope. Let's go on in that verse. It says this in verse 14, forgetting what is behind, straining towards what is ahead, he says this, I press on. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Now that's commitment. What's he saying? He's saying, I've committed. I'm all in. I've given up all other pursuits, and now I only have one goal. Having hope in the new year and following God. Okay, let me tell you this story. There was this one time where I knew this guy. He was a professional trainer and he was a professional bodybuilder. I mean, this dude was huge. I mean, every time I was even around this guy, I felt like I was a part of a far inferior species. Andrea used to say this. She used to say, hey, can I watch you and Doug work out? I'd be like, I can't make it today. And then she'd say, well, can I just watch Doug work out then? And at one point I said this, Doug, man, you are amazing. I want to look just like you. And he asked me a question that I'll never forget. He said, are you interested or are you committed? Because he said, you don't just drift into this. When you're committed, you lift weights until you feel like you are literally on fire. He says, some mornings I hurt so much that I can't even bend down to tie my shoe. I have to monitor every calorie that goes into my body. I wake myself up at night to ingest proteins when it can be best absorbed. And if you want to look like this, then you got to be committed. You got to be committed to have the courage to make friends with your pain. And then he asked me, are you committed to that? Well, you can tell just by looking at me what my answer was. You can tell that I wasn't all in. I was just, kind of in. I mean, I like that, but I guess I'm more of an admirer than a follower, you could say. So, here's what I'm trying to say. Here's your friend Jesus. And guess what? It turns out that he's not looking for admirers, just followers. You know what the Bible calls those people? The Bible calls those people disciples. That he is looking for people who will wholly surrender all of their money, all of their reputation, all of their achievements for a transformed character in a glorious kingdom that we cannot lose. It's not bad to be an admirer. It's just not what Jesus is looking for. He's looking for disciples. And here's the thing, if you do commit, he promises to be there for us when we do well, and he promises to be there when we don't. Cross his heart, hope to die.